I feel super honored to have this chance to have Polly Green here today. And Polly, thank you so much for being here. And I'd just like to ask you how you're feeling today.
All right. Well, thank you very much for having me on, Todd. And I'm feeling super happy and grateful. I'm really excited actually to dig into things with you. So, yeah, thanks for having me on the show.
Well, I really appreciate it. I guess the first, I just want to jump straight in and ask you, what does it mean to be an empath?
So, an empath is a person who is able to feel what other people feel. And oftentimes it can be overwhelming and confusing for empaths because they feel at such a deep level. And a lot of times it can be intense and it can be heavy, and there can be a lot of sadness or there can be a lot of guilt and grief associated with that. And that is a huge attribute of being an empath is being able to feel what other people feel on a really deep level to the point where they feel like it's theirs. And also some other attributes are if you're an empath, you may feel really overwhelmed in crowds or in cities, or you may get emotional really easily. Also, a trait is people may feel really comfortable with telling you everything. Strangers, like off the sidewalk, might just come up and tell you their whole life story, kind of thing. You may have really good energy with animals. Like animals tend to have a really good feeling around you and you with them. So those are kind of some traits. And then, but the main thing that people that I work with typically come to me for is because they're feeling overwhelmed with all of these emotions and energies that they don't know how to process.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's because it's not theirs, but they don't know it's not theirs because it feels like it's theirs. So a lot of the work that I do with people is help them to recognize, oh, wait a second. A lot of times it can be from a parent or a spouse. A lot of times it's a parent, though. And as a child, you may have learned to help that parent take, well, as children, a lot of times we take on that responsibility for our parents. And so learning how to distinguish what's your energy and what's not your energy. And then it's so empowering. And then a lot of times we end up not being in our bodies. And then, so the process that I work with my clients is figuring out, okay, let's get this energy out of your body. Let's call you back in your body. And then a lot of the practice is feeling what that's like. Oh, okay, like this is my neutral. That's what I call it. It's like that's what I feel like when I'm fully regulated and when I'm in my body. And then and what it feels like to be comfortable in the skin. Because a lot of times as empaths, we feel really uncomfortable in our own skin. And almost like something's wrong with us. Like that's how I felt. And I know a lot of my clients feel. And it's not that at all. It's just that you're feeling all of this that's not yours and it is uncomfortable. It's like,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. Amazing. How did you come along this journey? Was it something where as a child you were very aware that you were able to relate to people very easily? Was it something a quality that you had from a very young age? Was there a shifting point where you went from not recognizing yourself as having empathic qualities to all of a sudden coming into an understanding that you do? Can you talk a little bit about your own personal journey?
Yeah, sure. Well, as a young child, I always had that sensitivity to energy, um and I'm a child of an alcoholic also. And so I learned at a very young age to tune into my parents, what was going on with her. And I took on a lot of responsibility for that at a young age. But I didn't know that's what I was doing. And then in my 20s, I had a boyfriend whose mother had crossed over. And that's when I realized that I was a medium. So all of a sudden, I started hearing her. Mostly, she was there telling him that she loved him. but I could hear her, like she was right here talking in my ear. And then one night she actually came into my body and spoke to him through my body. And I was like out of my body, floating up on the ceiling, watching everything, which was freaky. I was like, what the heck is going on? And it freaked out him, it freaked out me. And so that's when I kind of started on this path. Like, and it was more so like, how do I deal with life on these terms? It's not something I really wanted, or, you know,
You
it was
weren't
more
you
like,
weren't
how do
seeking
I?
this. You weren't like
No,
reading books and going, that sounds so cool. I wish I could be like that. And then trying to
no,
cultivate it. It just kind of
no.
landed on your lap.
Yes. And I was also really susceptible to lower vibrational spirits as well. So that was super freaky. And then what I realized, so I was in my 20s, and what I realized is that when I was in nature, I felt the best, especially being in the water. And for empaths, what I've learned over time, and I just did it naturally, is like water is the instant way we can clear ourselves and get ourselves back into our bodies and feel regulated and clear energy that's not ours. So I got into whitewater kayaking, and I was on the river all the time, and I made it my career path. So that's what I sort of dreamed of as a child, as being an athlete. And this ability to connect with the other side and my abilities as an empath, I sort of thought was sort of like a burden. Like I wanted nothing to do with it, actually. And I was even skeptical myself of like energy work and all that stuff. I was more of an athlete type of person, and like very, grounded. I was also into spirituality, though. I was on a spiritual path starting from when I was about 18. So I was spiritually curious, I guess you could call it.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I was in school at Boulder at the University of Colorado. And the funny thing is about yoga, you're gonna love this, because I was just searching. I was like, okay, I know there's something more than this. I know there has to be something more to life than, you know, what I saw, the traditional path and all that. And I was like, all right, I'm going to find this. What is it? And
Yes.
then so I started dabbling, and I walked into an Ashtanga yoga class with Richard Freeman. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I would have started when I was 18. But it was just at that point, it was just so overwhelming. I was looking around at everyone doing Mysore style, and I was like, what the heck is this? And I explored like meditation. Like I went down all those tracks because it was available in Boulder at that time. This was in the 90s. But none of it really rung true for me. What really rung true was being in nature and the outdoors. And so I just dove in head first. And and then that's what led me into whitewater kayaking. And then what ended up happening is a few of my kayaking friends died because it's an extreme sport. And I had the first friend that crossed over, I had a dream about him 2 days before he died. And it was like he was right there, like in my dream. And he was in Chile and I was in America. And I was like, that's weird. Why? I wonder why, like, I had such a vivid dream. Well, then 2 days he crossed over. 2 days later, and then I kept dreaming about him, Todd. It was like he was right there, like he was somebody that I worked with on the river. And it was like I would have dreams, we'd be in meetings together, guide meetings, and he'd be like sitting right there. It was unbelievable. I was like, he's not gone. And so when he crossed over, I mean, it was sad that he wasn't in his body anymore, but I didn't even feel really grief because I was like, but he's still right here, you guys.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so then that made me really want to be able to use my abilities to help people and to be able to understand them more and stuff like that. And then I had another friend cross over kayaking, and it was the same thing. I would dream about him, and then I started inviting him on the river with me. I was like, hey, you want to come kayaking? And he'd be so excited, and I would have him paddle for me. Like when I got to like a waterfall or something hard, I would say, hey, you want to paddle my boat for me? And he would get all excited, and then I'd have a great line, and it was like I wasn't alone. So and then what happened was I was still trying to figure out how to navigate everything, like from a spiritual perspective. Really knowing there was more that I could be doing with my abilities, but I didn't know how. And I started on the yoga path in 2007, and I just kind of stumbled into Ashtanga yoga because of kayaking. So I thought that it would help me with my kayaking, help me be able to focus and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And that
And
was
so,
that. So just I just want to try to clarify, was that your Richard Freeman introduction, or was the Richard
no,
Freeman that was way, way back? You
that
were
was
really,
like
really not
10
really
years
ready to start doing
before.
the yoga. And then when you started coming back to the yoga, what was your, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but where did that lead you?
Well, again, I was so lucky, Todd. I was in New Zealand and I was like, all right, I want to, I knew
John
I'd
Scott?
always, no, Peter Sansom.
Oh, nice.
Do you know him?
To be
So he's
honest, I've heard the
amazing.
name, but I can't put a
He's
picture.
very kind of low profile, but he's
Uh-huh.
right up the chain. He's like,
Nice, nice.
so
Amazing.
anyway, I couldn't have learned from anyone better. And then he would do these workshops all the time. Yeah, write it down, Peter Sanson, if you ever
Oh,
get a
okay.
chance. He's like Guruji. It's like he channels. I mean, it's like, anyways. So he's amazing. Anyways, what was I saying? Oh yeah, he would do these workshops all the time, and people would come from all over the world, and they would start talking about Mysore and stuff. And I was like, whoa. And I'd always wanted to go to India, starting from when I was in my 30s, but I wanted to go for yoga. But I didn't want to go if I didn't feel kind of sort of confident in my practice. So I was like, well, I'm gonna go to Mysore, but I want to feel good with primary series. That was sort of my goal. So it took me about 5 years, and then I went to Mysore, and I had just recently gotten sober. So I find the other thing with empaths is that we tend to need or tend to gravitate towards addictions to help us numb the sensitivity so that we don't have to feel so much and don't have to absorb all this stuff. And so that was me to a T. And so around all that same time, I got sober for the second time. And then I went to Mysore, which was like, whoa. So, and then when I got to India, I was
So
like,
much for not feeling things. Yeah.
right. But you know
Let's
how
really get you
India
in your
is.
body. Let's really put
Yeah.
you in, and you'll be feeling your knees in every part of your body after session. Like try to walk up the stairs after a Mysore session in Mysore. You're like, okay, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling my body.
Yeah, and but not even only that, it wasn't the physical aspect for me so much because I was a professional athlete. So I was actually kind of wanting more exercise which I didn't have in my store, which kind of freaked me out. And so it made me want to
Interesting.
but what I learned is that I wanted to be able to live my life not dependent on anything to be happy. That was kind of the goal that hit me that first time in Mysore. I was like, you know what? I'm really toxic. I'm really judgmental. Like it kind of showed me all of these things about myself that were pretty confronting. And I didn't want to be like that. But I didn't know how to not be like that. But what I heard was you need to be in India. Like this is where you're gonna learn what you need to learn. Like kayaking and my sport and everything took me to that point, but I knew that if I just carried on that trajectory, I wasn't gonna get the lessons spiritually and personally and stuff that I really needed in this lifetime. But so what I ended up doing was I went back to New Zealand. I sold all my stuff because I was living there. And then I came back to India. And then India is really where I learned how to use my psychic abilities. I just found the right teachers. I found that in that place, because it is so spiritually open and accessible, it was just like, woo, this is where I'm supposed to be. But my goal was I want to feel happy and, or, I want to feel good within myself without needing anything. And that was my goal. And so it took me about 10 years.
Nice.
A lot longer than I was expecting, but
How
it
long
was
did you stay in
very
India
rewarding.
for? How long did you spend there on that?
Well, about 10 years.
Oh, you stayed in India for 10 years.
Yeah. And I would go back between
Wow.
there and Bali. So I spent about 4 years going back and forth between Bali
Wow.
and India. And then the rest
Wow.
of the time I was in India pretty much
And
primarily.
in Mysore, moving around India.
No, I moved around. So I really was gravitating towards the north. Like when I was in Mysore, it was great, but I knew I needed to get up like into the nature and the mountains and stuff. And so the next time when I went back, I went to way far north India into Ladakh, which is, very Buddhist and stuff, which I loved. And then I went to Rishikesh and the Ganges. Have you ever been to Rishikesh,
I have
Todd?
not. No, I have not been to the north. I
Oh,
know I want to go to Rishikesh. I really want to go to Varanasi. There's all those areas that I just think would be so fascinating and just looks like culturally just unbelievable.
you would love it. So that's where I mostly spent most of my time was in Rishikesh. And the Ganges became a real teacher for me and healer for me. And I spent a lot of time in that river. And it
Kayaking,
just
kayaking
went,
in.
no, like I would just go in there and stand. Kind of like now how cold plunging is really popular. It was kind of like a
Yeah.
cold plunge. And except for, it's this, they consider the Ganges River to be a goddess and really magical. And I swear, it is. And I've been on a lot of rivers. They're all around the world. And the Ganges is different. You go in there, and I would just stand there, and it was like the river would just clear everything off of me. And I would come out, and I would just sit on the sand, and then I'd just cry. Like I would just, and then I'd do that just over and over and over and over. And then it was like I started to get myself back. It was like, oh, this is what it feels like to be in this body without all this other stuff. And it was just, I just, yeah, it's
Wow.
a
That's
put words
awesome,
to it.
Polly. That's so cool.
Yeah,
Wow.
it was amazing. And then of course, like I had amazing yoga teachers. Like I was practicing with Louise Ellis there, which she was great. And then that's how come I ended up learning about David Griggs, and I practiced with him in the South. So then I went to Southern India to practice with him. And then that was so I did 10 weeks there when he was teaching there in Kovalam. And then COVID hit, and I was supposed to go back to Rishikesh after that. But I had gotten a message that I was going to get an invitation, and then I was supposed to say yes. Like this was the guidance that I had gotten. And I was like, okay. And I was kind of waiting for this invitation. Well, then someone told me about this town that's kind of close to where I was practicing with David. And she invited me to go there to this town that I'd never been to. And it was on the beach. And I was like, that's the invitation. Okay. So I went after the intensive with David. I went to this town that was right up the coast, still in the south. And it was awesome. You would love it. It's like the most beautiful beach. And I was just in this little town. I was like, wow, I think I could live here. Like, I just had that sense, like, I, I would like it. And then, boom, COVID came.
Ah,
And I was in this like paradise place. And I was like, okay. And I didn't end up going back to Rishikesh. I just stayed there for like 3 years.
wow. Wow.
So it was the most best time of my life. While all of the other rest of the world was like
Yeah.
hating it, I was like on this most beautiful beach in paradise, like
Wow. What was the
doing
name of
my
that place?
practice.
Where was that? You said not Covalum. You
It's called Varkala.
Varkala.
So if you ever have a chance to go
And
to
this is
Varkala,
north of Goa? North of Goa or
no,
south?
south,
South of
south.
Goa. Gotcha.
It's very, very
Covalum.
south down in
Covalum is
India.
like Trivandrum area, like way south of
Yes,
India.
yes,
Gotcha.
very close
Gotcha.
to Trivandrum.
All right.
Yep. You fly into Trivandrum, actually.
Wow. Oh my gosh, I have so many questions for you after everything
Woo!
you just said. Let me start with so the first question I want to touch upon, but then there's one that follows. But I think this first one will be important first. What is the difference, or how would we differentiate between three words, empath, psychic, and medium?
Hey, that's
Is
a
this,
great question.
are these all like little strands off of the same thing? Are they all the same thing? Are they all very different? What's
That's a super great question. Okay, let's start with, okay, a medium is someone who can connect with the other side specifically. So mediums can connect with like typically under the umbrella medium name is someone that can connect with someone who's crossed over. Okay, like so someone who's left this body, died, and is on the other side. That's typically what a medium is. Okay. A psychic is someone who can get information beyond the five senses. So you may hear, like when I was telling you how I heard the mother of my boyfriends. So that's clairaudience. You may have heard about like the clairs. So it's clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, and clair. So it's feeling, seeing, hearing, and knowing. The other one will come to me. So
cool?
those are kind of the four senses, and not every, say, psychic has those senses. Like somebody might see things, or somebody might hear things, or somebody might feel things, or somebody might know things. But for me, I have all four. And then, but not everybody does. Like somebody might feel stronger with getting visions or hearing or knowing or feeling. And then, so that's those kind of separated. And then an empath is what I described before, is somebody that feels other people's feelings. Or, yeah, an empath is somebody, if I was to boil it down, is somebody that is able to feel what someone else is feeling.
Yes. Okay.
So does that make sense? So
It
that you
does.
could
It does.
be
Yes.
one,
Yes.
one, one,
Mm-hmm.
but a lot of times you can be all three, or maybe you could be
Mm-hmm.
two, like they're psychic
Mm-hmm.
mediums. It kind of
I get it. I get it.
yeah. So
That's
not
a good answer.
everybody that's an empath has all these abilities, but a lot of times they do, and a lot of times the clients that come to me do. And
Cool.
that's, I
Cool.
think, why they're drawn to me is because I help them unpack all of this. And then because when I started working myself as a medium, I realized, wait a second, like people don't really need me to do, I was like, which was maybe a bad business strategy, but I was like, I think, I think I could help them connect basically without me.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's the work I do now, which is actually really gratifying. I like it a
Very
lot
cool.
because it empowers you. It empowers my clients to be able to connect on their own, on their own,
Yes.
whenever they want,
Yes.
which is so great.
Yes. Good point. So my next question then, when you started talking about going to India and feeling like because it's a spiritually adept place, there's just a long history of people asking questions and experimenting and meditating and searching, and there's just such a rich culture. I grew up in America where I grew up in a Catholic Christian sort of experience where I was taught to that psychic and mediumship and these other things were evil, dangerous, bad, of the devil, of the East, right? So I always had this feeling of like, oh no, that stuff is like I shouldn't believe in that, or that maybe is dangerous. So I guess my question is, do you feel like India is more open to that because of such a long history of so many people having exposure to it that then therefore there's maybe not as many negative connotations associated with it? And can you explain a little bit about how you help to maybe ease the process for folks that are feeling that they might have these abilities, but because of their cultural upbringing has been negatively associated with it, how to move past that?
That's a great question, Todd. I feel like in India, yes, to answer that question first, I felt, well, this is going to maybe sound kind of out there, but I felt personally divinely guided. Like, and also I felt so inspired because, and especially in Rishikesh, yogis from thousands of years like meditated in these caves up there. And the energy, you can feel it. I mean, especially if you're an empath, like, which is the plus side of being an empath is like you can feel the energy of them, Todd. Like you go into these caves where these yogis, like these sages, meditated. Oh my God. And you'd sit there and it was just like, zzt, like my brain would just go blank. And I would be like, like this is
Yes.
awesome.
Yes.
Better than any drug or anything you could ever do. Like it was just amazing and it was real, and I was like, okay, like this is what I want to figure out. Like
Yes.
they were onto something, and I personally I never wanted to use any of my gifts as sort of like party tricks or anything like that. But a lot of times you would hear about that, like sages or yogis or people being able to like stay warm when it was freezing cold in the Himalayas, meditating in these caves, and like how did they do that, and be able to like materialize things. And so I feel like India is sort of the um epicenter, and where it was respected. Being a yogi, being a spiritual person in India, oh my God, like you're so revered, and it's just the best path you could be on. And I think that's what excited me there. I was like, yes, like this is what I've been wanting since I was, 18 years old. Like I just had this feeling I wanted to be on this path. And here's all these people doing it. And it's like supported and, revered even. And then I felt the results. It wasn't just like, you know, this kind of aimless search. It was like, oh, whoa, like there's something to this, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yes.
um,
Good answer.
oh, okay. Good.
No, that was good. And then just to steer you toward the question about how the West interprets these skills, and maybe I'm seeing
Yeah.
it very different from you. Maybe you're not seeing the way I saw that there. But what are your feelings? I mean, obviously you're here in the West now. You live in the United States, I believe now, right?
Yeah, I'm back
Where
in
are you? Where are you,
California.
by the way?
I'm in California,
Oh,
which
cool.
is where my family is, which is why I'm here now currently,
Cool. Cool. All right.
helping out with my family. But
Yeah.
no, I 100% agree. And it's even hard for me to be here still now sometimes. I mean, I left America maybe like 30 years ago, and I never thought I'd come back here. I think because I could see the culture, and I didn't really fit into it. I was like, this isn't really what I want. Like, what people were kind of striving for here wasn't what I was striving for. Like, what I was striving for and what excites me, as you could tell, was like what those sages are doing in the caves. Like, that was my aspiration. Like, I wanted to just be a yogi and live in a cave. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't want anything, I wanted that. And so being back here is like kind of hard for me actually because it's a lot harder to connect. I do have to say, it's hard. Like in India, as you know, like you're smelling incense and everybody has an altar and it's so devotional and like there's temples everywhere. Like it just is so much easier, I think, to connect into the spiritual world there. And it's so supported. Whereas here you're like searching for, like, I remember being in India for a long stint one time and I came back and I was like, oh my God, Target is like the temple of America. It was like
Target, the Target temple. Yeah.
the
Well, that's
Target
actually a really good
temple.
observation. Yeah. I mean, well, you're right. I mean, if we have a materialistic God, we're going to worship materialism, and
Yes.
it's not
And I
any
just
different.
saw it
We
like,
just don't
what the
necessarily
heck?
recognize it as a religious or spiritual thing. It's just a different, I know that's so trippy, isn't it? Well, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Very
and then,
good.
but then to talk about what you're saying about I guess the religious beliefs and stuff like that. Um, Yeah, I mean, but even if you're like, I don't know. I think all religions, if you look in their texts and stuff have aspects of the supernatural or, spirit. Obviously, it's spirituality. Like, so, I mean,
Isn't that an interesting thing in relation to the fact that there's Jesus who's talking to God and having conversation?
right,
So why would we need to be so scared of that? Isn't that
right.
an interesting thing that no, but only one person should be able to have that ability? You know
No,
what
we
I
all
mean?
do.
No.
Yeah, we all do. And that's what I feel like almost what I'm here to tell people on the planet in my life is like, we all have that. And in yoga, I mean, it's talked about all the time that it's like right in here, it's right in our hearts. Like,
Yep.
and all we have to do is go in here and be able to connect. So yeah, on the side though, I do want to bring this up because
Please. Please.
I had this experience when I was in Bali. So there are there is the dark and the light. I'm not gonna pretend like there isn't. Like, and when I first started opening up my abilities, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, really? I can do that? And like, so I started working on an energetic level that was like, let's say I was in kindergarten as an energy practitioner. I was like, I'm gonna clear this whole I don't know I just got these very grandiose ideas. And in Bali, like there was a lot of avenues where you can work with that stuff. And so I was going to all the things and doing the things. And then I just got flattened. Like so, and then in Bali, I was learning, I was kind of had this mentorship with this Balinese priest there who was a huge, amazing influence for me. And I went to him and I told him what happened. Like I got really sick. And after I did this clearing work, and he's like, Polly, like you're playing with fire. You because especially in Bali, like there is black magic. So, and he told me stories of like that I don't even really want to repeat. But so I mean, it can be used on the dark side as well. And so it's very important. I always tell people I work with, it's like I only work with the highest divine light. And I think if you are listening to this and if you're like starting in on your abilities, it's like really important that you're clear with what you're tapping into, because there is the opposite. And what he did for me in Bali, because I was doing energy work there, he's like, you need permission from the ancestors to do this work here, which was totally valid. And so what we did was he called it my spiritual passport. And so he took me around to like 12 of the most important temples in Bali. And like we prayed to the ancestors and he asked that I be given that permission to work on that level there. It,
Interesting. Whoa.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. In India, I don't feel so much
Yeah.
for the dark energy, but in Bali, it's very dual. There's the black and the white, like and you can feel it. So, anyways, I
Wow.
just wanted to
Wow.
throw that out there
Yeah,
to say,
please.
like, there
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
is, and before I got a harness on my abilities, I was tapping into the lower frequency energies, and they're there. Like, there's earthbound spirits, you know, that are still walking around on the earth, and like you, it's possible to tap into that. So it's kind of like, and this is what I teach my clients too. It's like how to have energetic boundaries, how to have discernment, because for me, and especially if you drink alcohol and why they call it spirits. Like I was really susceptible to earthbound spirits when I used to drink alcohol, and that I would go into a blackout, boom, like people would say you are like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Well, guess what? It's because somebody else was like operating the body here.
Mm,
And
interesting.
so that was also another big reason why I wanted to get sober was because holy crap, like that is scary, you
Yeah.
know?
That's a
And why
fascinating way
people
to look
do
at it.
horrible things
Yeah.
under the
Yeah.
influence of alcohol, a lot of times it's not even them. That's my perspective. So anyway,
Amazing. Where do you feel it seems to me that science and this metaphysical world is starting to really prove one another,
yeah,
support one another. There's a incredible amount of literature amongst the quantum mechanics or quantum physics crowd that's opening more and more potentiality for everything that you're speaking of, so that the skeptic, if reading even from the scientific side, might start to go, well, they're kind of pointing that this is very, very possible. Um, what are you noticing in terms of all that, like skepticism versus open-minded skeptic? What do you where's your feelings and thoughts on that?
I feel like this is a great time because, and I really like the work of Dr. Joe Dispenza a lot. And I feel like he's trying to bridge those worlds, between science and spirituality and quantum physics and stuff. And I love that he is measuring all that stuff. I feel like it's groundbreaking. I mean, I feel like it's really is. And I feel like I've always known this, like that spontaneous healing can happen. Like, um, you know, all this stuff that is happening, but what he's doing now is quantifying it scientifically, which I think is awesome because it is so, it's like, and what I love about that is that it means that spirituality isn't like this woo-woo thing anymore. Like it's actually being proven. And I really do think it's cutting edge,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. Um, and that even high up like medical establishments like Stanford and stuff like that are starting to take notice and be like, oh, whoa, like how can we, like if somebody has Parkinson's disease and a week later they don't, like what the heck? That's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
So, and working with those, that high vibrational frequency and meditation and, you know, it in visualization, it's awesome.
Oh my gosh, that's cool. Can you talk a little bit about how the idea that you said as an empath that maybe we might be having this really odd feeling, uncomfortable, or something feels off, or I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And, maybe if I was to go to the psychologist or psychiatrist, they'd say, you're having anxiety and we need to treat the anxiety. And therefore, there's different treatments. And so I'm curious, when you made mention of the fact that maybe where an empath is hearing the thoughts or feeling the feelings of other people, and it's not necessarily ours or not necessarily yours or theirs.
Mhm.
So how does one begin to identify that the feeling and or thoughts or emotions that I'm having are not mine? Because I guess that's a interesting place, because if I'm, I want to take responsibility for my feelings, thoughts, emotions. But if there truly is this thing that I'm picking up on others, and therefore and like reflecting it or holding it or being that, how do we differentiate?
Great question, Todd. I'll give you some really great ways to discern, okay? And for everybody listening. So, like, let's say you're feeling really good. Like you did your practice, you're feeling regulated, you're like feeling, balanced and stuff. And then let's say you leave your shala or whatever and you run into somebody on the sidewalk and you instantly get a headache or you get a sore throat or you feel sad. And this is what I encourage you and people to start really taking notice of, like, okay, wait a second. 5 minutes ago, I felt fine. Like, or, I felt, I like to call it my neutral. It's like, all right, this is what I feel like when I'm, you know,
Yes.
and then if it happens suddenly like that, and because you've been usually around a certain, someone, a person, that's a telltale sign. And so that's one way to realize it. Another way, like for me, and if you've done a lot of Vipassana, I've done a lot of Vipassana too. You know how like they have you scan, you do body scans, which is a great skill to have, especially if you're an empath, because you can start scanning your body like a lot and being like, wait a second, I'm feeling like like sometimes if I'm around, toxic energy, I'll just get like this feeling of like toxic shock, and it's like bloop, and I can almost feel it like running through my body. And I'll be like, wait a second, I wasn't feeling like that 5 minutes ago. Okay, like this person probably has something going on that I'm picking up on. Another thing, and it can be confusing if you don't know this. You'll think, oh, am I coming down with a cold or something, or why, So anyway, so that's kind of the first step. Also, if you're in a crowded environment, or like if you're doing healing work, especially like if like you do, or in the shala, or it's really easy to pick up on other people's energy. So I'm like really vigilant about clearing my space all the time, clearing myself all the time. Like I'm brushing my teeth. So I use like Palo Santo or sage, or even like if you can't do that, I have like spray energy clearing sprays. And then I do have some quick commands that I say to clear my energy. It doesn't take long, like 2 minutes. But just being really aware of how you feel kind of from
Yes.
minute to minute as you go
Yes.
through your day. And then you can even have you can even journal it. And then just starting to backtrack. Wait a second. I was feeling fine before that.
Mm. Hmm. Yeah, it's so fascinating. You're right.
Yeah. And a lot
So,
of the symptoms can also be like, I just don't feel like myself. Like, have you ever had that feeling where you're like, God, I just don't feel like myself? Like, I can't make
yeah,
decisions. I don't
yeah,
feel clear.
yeah.
I
I'm
feel
normally like
guilt.
this, but right now this is odd. Yeah, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so
Those are
fascinating though.
telltale
I mean,
stuff.
don't you feel like though, like we were like, I mean, well, A, we were never trained in any of this, right? Like, I mean, what kind of supportive systems did we have as children growing up that actually kind of fostered or helped us to understand this? I'd say very little, unless we had really cool parents to, maybe guide us along. But I guess, like, okay, for example, if I'm just like, have that same question that you just said, where you're just kind of like, gosh, it's just, I feel so weird. Like, this just isn't me. I mean, aren't we kind of in our current strategies taught to think that something's wrong with us? Or,
Yes.
I mean,
And
a lot,
that's how come
yeah,
I always
yeah.
felt like something was wrong with me.
Yeah. What is wrong with me? Like, why? Yeah, isn't
Yes,
that
but
funny?
I'm here to tell you, if you're
Yeah.
listening and you feel like that, nothing's wrong with you. You're probably and the collective energy, especially now, like it's really easy if you're an empath and sensitive to pick up on
Ooh.
all this collective drama
Yeah.
happening, which is super
Yeah.
hardcore and
Yeah.
heavy. And
Yeah.
and I'm not saying be an ostrich and put your head in the sand, but it's like I call it like spiritual hygiene. It's kind of like, all right, I can take responsibility for what I put in my body and what I listen to and the people I'm around. And like it's like I'm responsible for because I don't want to feel all that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it makes me kind
Yeah.
of extra vigilant. Like I don't like to read the news or watch scary movies or anything like that. Like why? Because it's super low frequency and it's like
Mm.
and
Yes.
it's not bypassing, and I know that gets thrown around all the time, like, oh, you're just spiritually bypassing. But I really am not. It's like I'm aware, but I know that to be on this earth and to make an impact, like I I need to feel good. Like I need to be the best version of myself I can
Yeah.
so that I can then help others, you know. But if I get bogged down in all this collective blah, it's like, ugh, like it would probably kill me, like if I really like dove into it because it's so heavy and
Yeah. Yeah.
so it's like
Isn't it
how am
though?
I going to be
Isn't
a
it
helpful person here?
just to take a short little pause without going into details, isn't it a little bit heavy right now?
It
Do
is.
you sometimes wonder that has it always been heavy and I'm just becoming more in tune, so I'm picking up on the heaviness? Because if we look around, you might come across some sort of idea that you're just like flabbergasted with, and then you'll be checking somebody out and say, yeah, I just want to see if this person is picking up on the same thing. So you start asking a few questions and you find out, no, they're not. They're not. No. Or I mean, and then I don't know. I just think, I wonder Is it because I'm getting a little bit more sensitive and in tune with things and I'm picking up on more? And this has always been here. These vibrations have always
Yes,
been
I know,
around.
I agree with
And
you.
it's
I
and
agree.
the white and the dark and all that stuff, it's always been there. It's just that now
Yeah.
we're starting to sense that, oh my goodness, this stuff is here. And I just was oblivious to it.
Yeah.
Or I guess probably both of these are true. Is there an increase of the intensity? I mean, it feels like there's like an increase of intensity. I'm having a hard time figuring out if it's me or is it the world? And I'm guessing it's probably both.
Probably both.
And probably both. Thank you. All right.
That's what I'm getting for you. And yeah, that's what it feels like to me. And it's
Right.
but I guess like on the positive side, and I'm kind of glad we're bringing this up, and
Yeah,
it's like
please.
through the
Yeah.
work you're doing and through the work that I do, it's kind of like being a channel for the highest frequency of energy to flow through us, right? When you're working with your people and when I'm working with my people. And it's like the more we can turn these lights on and the more we can channel high frequency energy. And I think that's the other cool thing. Like when I
Mm.
was talking about the
Mm.
dark and the light, like I
Yeah.
think, yes, it is getting extremely low frequency around here. But guess what? Like I also feel this huge opening is happening. And
Yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
the opposite end of the scale. So it's
Yeah.
kind of going like this. And what's her name? Dolores Cannon. I don't know if you've ever read any of her
I'll
books,
write
but
it down. Right.
she was so ahead of her time and she actually predicted this and that there was like going to be kind of like a separating of the worlds. And and this is what's so exciting, Todd, is like where you identify your energy is what world you go to. And this is what exactly happened to me when I was told you about Varkla, and I was in this like paradise while the rest of the world was like, having the worst time of their life. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is being, I'm like, this is happening. Like I was so like
That is
convinced that the
wild.
worlds were
That would have
because
been
I was
in
in such a
really
different
bizarre.
reality,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
literally in paradise,
Two
having the
different
best.
worlds, two like almost
Yes,
existing on the same planet, but in
yes.
two,
So, but that's why I feel
which
like
would
as
be hard,
you're
which would be easy and hard at the same time. Easy because cool, and hard because what the heck? Like what? How could this be? Do you know what I mean? Like
right.
how could this be? Like what? Do you
So
know?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel like our work and probably like on a
Yeah.
cosmic level or spiritual level, like why you've been called to do the work you do, why I've been called to do the work I do. It's like and this is what I got. I got this message at one point in time. It was maybe around COVID, I'm not sure, but is that that's our job is like to help people that might be between the two worlds or like might be on the fence, like
Mm,
which way am I gonna go?
mm.
It's like, hey, come over here. Like, you
Yeah.
know, really it's a lot better and that you have a choice, and I guess that's what I want to empower people with too is like we have a choice.
Yeah.
And
You have a
it's
choice.
like I feel like the more people tap into that feeling of empowerment, because I feel like what's spreading now is kind of this virus of like hopelessness, but I
Yeah.
feel like the more we can tap into that high frequency of feeling empowered, and doing what we can personally ourselves, then that's how things change. And that's why I went on that whole long journey in India. I was like, you know what? I can't change the world, but I can change myself. And so I'm going to do that because I have control
Yeah.
over that.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I teach my clients. And it's like, you know what? We do have control over our internal environment. And that's then what goes out into the world. So the more clear we are within ourselves, the more we're able to show up in a energy that feels good to other people, or be nice to that person at Costco that dropped their toilet paper off their cart or whatever. It's like the more we can show up in the world in these small ways and be nice or say hi or smile or like even acknowledge someone, you know,
Yes.
that's how things are going to change. But
Yeah.
it starts with us,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it starts with being on that yoga mat, what you're doing, the work you're doing with your people. And it starts with, the work I'm doing. So it's like the more people can show up, and I think more and more people are showing up and like realizing,
That's so cool, Polly. I am with you. You know, as you're talking, it's reminding me of last year. I took took my family to go. My wife's family live up in Tennessee, so we went on a rafting trip where we were going down a river, and we had a guide, and there's a big crew, a bunch of different boats all going down. And the way the guide explained every little nook and cranny of where the water was going to spin this way, where the water was going to go that way. We're going to hit this angle, we're going to come in on this angle, and then we're all going to go hard on this side, and just such an intimate relationship with that river and how the water was flowing through it. Have you ever had any experiences on the water where you felt like, I don't know, just some sort of connection or portal, or in studying the way water flows, and then obviously some dangerous situations. Like
yeah,
like you said, you lost friends doing this. This is an extreme sport where, you know, you're on a fine line. You're you're
it
riding
is.
it, or maybe you're sucked under and not riding anymore. So I've just loved to hear a story from you about maybe a close call or a moment where you had to then trust in.
Mhm.
You know, I loved hearing about how you said you brought your friend with you and said, "Do you want to paddle now?" And almost like giving your body over to letting that person experience it, and even experiencing your own body
Yeah.
through imagining, or I don't even know if imagining is the right word, but just like opening yourself up to letting somebody, another energy come in to move you along. Can you just talk a little bit more about that? Because I find this stuff fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I do it all the time, especially with that friend on the other side, because he was like a hardcore adventure person. Like he was a really great kayaker. He loved adventure, and so do I. And we even talked about going to India together before he crossed over and stuff. And he was good at riding motorcycles. And so I do it with him on the river all the time. And with another friend of mine that's crossed over, I ask them to come with me all the time. And I can feel them and they get so excited. They're like, "Yay!" And then also when in a pinch, and I want to share this for everybody to know this, that your loved ones on the other side want to help you. They are there to help. But we on this side have to ask. And this is like a crucial thing that I don't know if everybody knows. So it's kind of like you pick up the phone and you call them spiritually. And you're like, "Hey, mom or grandma or friend, I need help with this." And a lot of times it works out best if that person was good at that thing in this lifetime. So, like with my kayaking friends, I asked them to help me with, kayaking things. Or like my grandmother was really good at business. So I asked her to help me with business things, stuff like that. So they are there to help us and they want to help, but we have to ask. So it's kind of like a two-way conversation. That's a really important thing to know. And like with my one adventure friend, like I was motorcycling in India and I'm not a good motorcycler. I I just got this call to go motorcycle to monasteries in India. And I was like, really? Like I was scared of like driving a little scooter in Bali. I was like, okay. So, anyways, I did by myself. I didn't even have like motorcycle outfit or anything. I was like wearing my yoga outfit. And I ended up on the highest motorable road in the world in India by myself, being like a beginner motorcycler. Okay, like anyways, so I was in some very perilous situations. Well, I would call my friend, like, help. Like at one point it was like sleeting. I had like cotton pants on, no gloves. I couldn't even work the brakes. I mean, I was in this on this Himalayan road that had no guardrails. There's no people. I was like, holy crap, this is pretty bad. And then I called him in. Somehow, miraculously, I didn't crash. There was a guy on the side in the middle of nowhere. This guy on the side, you know how it is in India. He's like, room, room. Like, I'm like, what the? And I pull over without even crashing. They like make me chai. They have like a room. I mean, stuff like that. Like these
Yeah.
miraculous type
Yeah.
things
Wow.
can really save us in these times where we need help, but we have to really ask.
Yeah. Amazing. Holy cow, Paul, you're a solid adventurer.
Yeah,
You're like
pretty
a
solid.
full-on adventurer.
But I want to say I'm
I
like
love it. I
a little
love
bit
it.
naive sometimes, which
Yeah.
gets a long way. I mean, in
Isn't it
kayaking, I'm very
amazing?
experienced, but with these
Yes.
other adventures, I'm like, let's just learn how to ride a motorcycle, and
Yes.
like, it's pretty funny. I mean, I don't know. I also get lucky, but I also I follow guidance, and like I was really
Mm.
guided on that well, I did it twice, but like these two motorcycle trips, I was obsessed. It was like I had to go. I'm like, well, if I'm being called to do this, I'm going to be okay. So a lot of it's trust and faith and asking my other side team for help. And then, you know what happened, Todd? People would just show up out of nowhere. Like a few times I did have little crashes, not big crashes, but just like little ones. The motorcycle, as you know, it was a Royal Enfield, those real big, heavy bikes they have in India, the Bullet. You've probably seen them a bunch, but I couldn't lift it up by myself. It was so heavy, and I'm pretty small. And these guys would like just show up out of nowhere. I'd be in the middle of, the mountains, and like all of a sudden there's four guys there helping me lift up my bike. I'm like, what?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Polly, that is awesome. That is so
Yeah,
awesome.
so like to just inspire people that maybe like are unsure or whatever,
Mm.
I would say that intuition, or when you get that like nudge, or it's a very quiet voice, and to be able to listen to that and follow that, because that's your own internal guidance system, like leading you on your path. And I believe it's for our own growth, our own personal growth in this lifetime, to learn these lessons, whatever they are. And a lot of times it's going to be that little whisper.
Yeah.
And it probably for you or most people won't be like, go ride your motorcycle to monasteries in the Himalayas. Like that was a pretty extreme example. But like, maybe it's like, go do this thing that you never really thought of, or maybe it's scary.
Right, right.
And to
Go,
be able
go.
to kind of take that next step into these things that
Yeah.
scare us,
Yes.
because a lot of times facing the fear
Yeah.
is where we really grow.
It doesn't it seem like when you stare fear down, it just goes poof into a little bit of smoke and it's gone. It's almost like these little fear monsters that creep in and you just go, wait, I'm gonna stop running, I'm gonna turn, face you, and then just
Exactly.
disappear. They're gone. It's just,
Yep.
yeah. Wow, Polly. You know what? Oh my gosh, time goes by too fast. We can find your website, pollyandtheotherside.com. Link will be in the description. Instagram at polly.and.theotherside. Um, I can't wait to talk to you again. I know we're gonna have another
Loved it.
conversation.
I know this was awesome.
But I just want to see if there's any closing. And is there anything that you feel called to share?
Mm, yeah, if I was to talk to people that are listening, I would, and a lot of what I find just so empowering personally is to learn to trust yourself and trust that voice and trust your intuition. And like you said earlier, a lot of times we're not taught how to do that. And usually we're taught to question it or not listen to it. But the more we listen to that little voice inside, the more we're going to be guided on our path to things that maybe you couldn't even imagine. And that's what's so exciting and cool about life. So that's my kind of final takeaway, is to trust that inner voice and that little spark inside that might lead you down a road that you weren't expecting. But take that road. That's what I'm here to say.
Beautiful. I also want to give a special thanks to Becky Durkin, who came in, took a yoga class, and we started talking. And she said, "You really got to meet my cousin, Polly." And hence, then I found you, wrote you, and here we are. So thank you, Becky, so much. And thank you, Polly. This has been a real pleasure. And I love hearing your stories. And thank you for being so open and sharing and just kind and patient and just really enjoyed this. Thank you.
I really did too. Thank you so much, Todd. It's been awesome.
Thank you.